Have you ever sat by the phone just hoping to hear from them? You've raised them, loved them, given them your best years, and now the silence feels louder than any argument ever did. You wonder if you did something wrong. You ask yourself, why don't they reach out? Why don't they check in? Don't they miss me even a little? If you've felt this way, you are not alone. In fact, many parents, especially after 60, find themselves in this exact position. The house is quieter now, but it's not the peaceful kind. It's the kind of quiet that carries questions you're afraid to ask out loud. Questions like, do they still need me? Do they even care anymore? But here's the thing I want you to know right away. Their silence doesn't mean you failed, and it certainly doesn't mean they don't love you. In most cases, it's not a lack of love at all. It's something far more complex. And believe it or not, sometimes it's because they need you that they stay away. Strange, right? So today, let's walk through this together. You and me. We're going to explore what's really going on beneath the surface. Why your children may not be reaching out, even though deep down, they still need you more than they realize. And more importantly, what you can do about it. Not just to understand them, but to feel empowered again in your own heart. Let's start with something very common, but often overlooked. The first reason is that they might feel ashamed. Yes, ashamed. Not of you, but of themselves. Maybe they're not where they thought they'd be by now. Maybe life hasn't gone the way they planned. Financial struggles, relationship troubles, bad choices that piled up. And instead of coming to you for help like they once did, they retreat. They pull away. They think they're protecting you from their mess. They don't want to look like they've failed in front of you. They remember the way you used to guide them, how you always had the answers. And now they're embarrassed they don't have their own. It's not rejection. It's self-protection. But that silence still hurts. Think of it like this. When a child falls and scrapes their knee, they run to you without thinking. But when they grow up and scrape their pride, they run the other way. They still need you. They just don't know how to say it anymore. And here's something else I want to gently bring up. Sometimes, your kids avoid contact because they fear judgment, even when you never meant to judge. Perhaps in the past, you offered advice they weren't ready to hear. Or maybe a comment that was meant as concern landed like criticism. They remember it, even if you don't. I know this is hard to hear, but it's important. As parents, we often speak from love, but they hear it through the filter of their own insecurity. It's not your fault. But recognizing this can be a bridge back to connection. You might be wondering, so what do I do then? Do I just wait? Should I call? Should I stop trying? And the answer is, don't stop caring. But do start listening more than advising. When you do speak to them, let them know you're not here to fix them. You're here to hear them. That one shift, that one sentence. I'm just happy to hear your voice, not to give you advice. Can change everything. Another reason they might be keeping their distance? They're overwhelmed. Life today moves at a pace many of us still can't quite understand. Even those of us who've adapted to smartphones and video calls and texts instead of letters. They're pulled in 1,000 directions. Work, kids, bills, expectations, burnout. They're tired. Not of you, but of everything else. And when that happens, sometimes calling mom or dad, even just for 5 minutes, feels like something they want to do but don't have the energy to follow through on. You've probably heard this before. I meant to call you, I really did, but the day got away from me. And yes, sometimes that's an excuse. But often, it's actually the truth. You are on their mind. They just don't realize how fast the clock is ticking, how much your time means. But here's the part that matters most. They don't know how much it hurts you when they stay quiet. Because they assume you're okay. They assume you understand. They assume you're not sitting there counting the days since the last text, the last visit, the last anything. The question is, how do you bring them back without guilt or pressure? You do it with grace, with presence, with patience. You reach out, not with the weight of "why haven't you called me?" but with the warmth of "I just wanted to hear your voice." That small change in tone is everything. It's the difference between pulling someone close and pushing them away. Now, let's talk about another truth that's not easy to admit. Sometimes they think you've moved on too. You seem busy. You seem independent. You travel. You have friends. Maybe you've even posted on social media and they think, "Wow, mom's doing great. She probably doesn't need me the way she used to." What a twist, right? They've spent years learning to become independent. Now they're assuming you've done the same. But just because you're strong doesn't mean you don't miss them. Just because you've learned how to be alone doesn't mean you want to be. It's okay to let them know that. Not in a way that makes them feel guilty, but in a way that makes them feel valued. A simple message like, "It made my day to see your name pop up." Or, "I always love hearing from you." Anytime, for any reason, is enough to remind them. They still matter to you, no matter how old they are. Let's not forget that relationships, especially with grown kids, aren't linear. They don't follow a script. There will be times of closeness and times of distance. That's part of the rhythm of life. What matters is how we show up when the opportunity comes again, how we greet them when they finally do call, not with hurt in our voice, but with love in our heart. The older we get, the more we understand this truth. Relationships don't have to be perfect to be meaningful. And silence doesn't always mean disconnection. It just means there's space. Space we can gently begin to fill again. So the next time you're sitting there wondering, why don't they call? Take a deep breath. Remind yourself, it's not because you're forgotten. It's often because they feel too far gone to reach out. But you, with your grace and wisdom, can be the light that brings them back. You know, it's strange how even the people we raised, the ones who once clung to us every night before bed, can suddenly seem like strangers. Not because they don't love us, but because life has carried them so far and so fast that they've forgotten how to slow down and reach back. But love doesn't disappear just because it goes quiet. And silence doesn't mean the connection is lost. It just means the bridge needs rebuilding. Sometimes the hardest truth to accept is this: your kids might be waiting for you to make the first move, not because they don't care, but because they're unsure how to come back. There's fear involved, even in love. Fear of awkwardness, fear of saying the wrong thing, fear that too much time has passed, and yes, even fear that they may have disappointed you. What makes this especially painful is the quiet expectation many parents hold close, that once their children are grown, the relationship will just continue. But here's the thing no one really talks about. Adult relationships between parents and children require new skills, different rhythms, and most of all, effort from both sides. It's not automatic, but it can absolutely be rebuilt. Let's explore one of the deepest reasons your children might not be contacting you. And this one may surprise you. Sometimes they don't reach out because they think you wouldn't understand what they're going through. They assume the world they live in now is just too different from yours. They think you wouldn't get the stress of modern parenting, the job market, the housing prices, the constant comparison on social media, the mental health struggles no one talks about out loud. They love you, but they feel like they have to edit themselves around you. That's exhausting for anyone. So they stop calling. But here's the beautiful truth. You do understand more than they know. You've lived through pain, confusion, hardship, heartbreak, and disappointment too. You might not have had social media, but you've had silent battles of your own. And if they only gave you the chance, you could meet them in that space, with wisdom instead of judgment, with calm instead of critique. So the next time they give you even a sliver of vulnerability, just a comment about being tired or overwhelmed or unsure, try something simple. Listen. Ask them gently, "Tell me more about that." Don't jump in to solve it. Don't immediately compare it to your own past. Just be the quiet, safe space where their walls can come down. That's how trust is built. That's how they start calling again. Not because they should, but because they want to. Now let's talk about something else. Something that might sting a little. Sometimes the reason your kids don't reach out is because they're still holding on to old wounds. Maybe it's something you said in the heat of an argument. Maybe it's a way you parented that, in hindsight, you'd do differently. Or maybe it's something you didn't say, something they wish you had acknowledged. This doesn't make you a bad parent. Not at all. You did the best you could with what you had. But we all carry memories differently. And sometimes those memories create a wall that no one talks about, but everyone feels. If this is the case, here's what I want you to know. You don't need to fix the past to reconnect in the present. You just need to show that you're open, that you're still here, that even if there are things left unsaid, there's room for healing. You can say something like, "I know we've had our ups and downs, but I want you to know I'm here now. And I care deeply about where we go from here." That one sentence can begin to dissolve years of misunderstanding. Not because it erases the past, but because it honors the present. People sometimes think that healing only happens through big, emotional conversations. But in truth, it often begins in quiet, consistent gestures. Your tone, your patience, your willingness to keep showing up with love, even when you're unsure how it'll be received. There's another reason they might not be calling, and this one is more common than you'd think. They simply don't know how much you need them now. When you were younger, you were the strong one. You held the family together. You were the one everyone called for advice, money, support, even just comfort. You were the rock. And now that you've grown older, you may not say it out loud, but you need them more than ever. Emotionally, at least. Not for money, not for help with groceries, but for connection, for presence, for love. The trouble is, they don't always see that. They still think of you as that same strong parent who has everything figured out. But you're human too. And humans need to feel loved, wanted, and included. So maybe it's time to gently show them that. Not with guilt, never with guilt, but with honesty. If you're lonely, say, "I miss hearing your voice." If you're hurting, say, "It would mean the world to me just to talk, even for 5 minutes." Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the key that unlocks emotional doors. And here's something I deeply believe. Your kids still care. They may not show it the way you want them to. They may be clumsy in how they express it. But the bond you built is still in there, under layers of distance, stress, and fear. They just need a little help finding their way back to it. And you, with your lifetime of strength and love, have the power to guide them home. One of the most powerful things you can do is to simply remain open. Not perfect, not endlessly patient, but open. Open to conversation. Open to change. Open to letting the past stay in the past. Because while you can't change what was, you can shape what comes next. And yes, sometimes they won't respond right away. Sometimes you'll reach out and hear nothing back for a while. That's when your inner strength becomes your anchor. Don't spiral. Don't second-guess your worth. Don't chase. Just be steady, consistent, loving, calm. That consistency, your emotional steadiness, is what makes you magnetic again. It creates safety. And when people feel safe, they begin to return. This isn't about begging for attention. It's about standing in your quiet power and saying, "I'm here. I'm still your parent. And I still believe in us." Because whether your child is 18 or 48 or 68, deep down, they still want that love. they still need to know that they can come back, not to be fixed, but to be loved, just as they are. So if today feels a little quiet, take heart. The story isn't over. And even a tiny shift in how you reach out, when done with warmth and authenticity, can open doors you thought were closed forever. You know, sometimes the silence from our kids doesn't come from a place of resentment or anger. Sometimes it comes from their own deep-rooted need for space. That might be hard to hear, especially when you miss them so much it aches. But space isn't always about distance. It's often about survival. Let me explain. There are seasons in life when even the people we love most need to pull back. Not to hurt us, but to catch their breath, to figure themselves out, to manage the overwhelm that comes from careers, kids, aging parents, financial pressure, or even their own emotional growth. And when that happens, they don't always know how to say it. They don't always know how to ask for space without sounding ungrateful. So instead, they go quiet. But here's the thing, I hope you never forget. Space doesn't mean the bond is broken. In fact, giving someone room, without taking it personally, can sometimes be the most loving thing you do. Because when they're ready to return, you've left the light on. You've shown them that your love isn't conditional. It's constant. It's safe. Still, I understand how hard that is. You give them space, and then the mind starts to wander. What if they never come back? What if I'm just not important anymore? These questions can echo loudest in the stillness. And yet that's where your strength matters most. That's where quiet patience, yes, even as a parent, becomes the gift that holds everything together. It's not about waiting by the phone or counting the days. It's about filling your own life with the kind of meaning that doesn't depend on anyone else. And that brings us to one of the most overlooked reasons your kids might not be calling. Because they feel like you've given up on yourself. I know that may sound unfair, but think about it. When kids see their parents aging with vitality, purpose, even curiosity, it inspires them. It reminds them you're still growing, still living, still worthy of being included. But when they sense you've stopped investing in yourself, they sometimes pull away. Not to punish you, but because they don't know how to reconnect with someone who's slowly disconnecting from life. Now, don't get me wrong. You don't need to prove anything to your children. You don't need to take up skydiving or start a business at 75. But when you show that you're still curious about the world, still passionate about something, still hopeful about what's ahead, you send a powerful message. I'm not just waiting. I'm living. And that energy draws people back. Not just your kids, but everyone around you. So go take that art class. Join the walking group. Volunteer. Learn how to use that smartphone better so you can surprise them with a text before they do. Not because you're trying to win them back, but because you deserve to live a full, rich life. Whether they call today, next week, or next month. And here's one final truth to sit with. The role you play in your children's lives will evolve, but it will never disappear. You are still their parent. You are still a piece of their story, even if they don't say it. Even if they forget to show it. Even if it takes them years to realize what your presence really meant. But your job now isn't to fix them. It's not even to remind them of what they're missing. Your job is to stay rooted in love, in dignity, in calm. That's where your power is. And that brings us full circle to the most important message of all. You are not alone. There are thousands, even millions of parents out there just like you. Parents who gave their all, who did their best, who still love deeply, and who sometimes feel forgotten. But you're not forgotten. You matter. Not just because of the past you've shared with your children, but because of the present and future you still hold in your hands. You don't need to chase anyone to prove your worth. You don't need to replay every conversation or question every decision. What you need is to remember who you are. You are someone who has made it through storms they'll never know about. someone who raised a family in a world that was changing faster than anyone expected, someone who still has more love to give and who deserves to receive love in return, not as a reward, but as a recognition of your humanity. So if this video spoke to you, I want you to take a deep breath right now. Put your hand over your heart and remind yourself, I am enough. I have done enough. I still matter. Let that truth settle in. And then, when you feel ready, reach out. Not out of fear or loneliness, but out of strength. A short message. A lighthearted photo. A memory you just wanted to share. Not to guilt them into calling, but to remind them that the door is still open. That you're still here. That love doesn't age, it deepens. And if they don't respond right away, that's okay. Because you've planted the seed. You've done your part. And now you can return to your life with peace in your heart, knowing that your love stands strong. Quietly, patiently, unshakably. Before you go, I'd love for you to take a moment and share in the comments. Have you experienced this kind of silence from your children? What helped you navigate it? Or what do you wish others understood about it? Your story could inspire someone else who's sitting in that same quiet room, wondering the same thing you once did. And if this video brought you comfort or clarity, please give it a thumbs up so we know it mattered to you. Subscribe to Strong Elderly Life if you haven't already. We're building a space where your wisdom, your feelings, and your voice are honored. Because you're not just aging, you're still becoming. Here's to living with love, grace, and quiet power. I'm so glad you're here. I'll see you in the next one.